session. Hold on, please stay on the line. The Zoom will. So yes, that's great. Already streamed on YouTube. All right. Hello. Good evening, well done, and good evening, everyone. So today we're gonna have session about it's kind of mental health awareness. We're gonna have what's that? The session and a new insight about how to stay and how to be aware about mental health because it will be relate on our diabetic, especially if you have like an experience with a like resistant insulin. Because I also understand as a woman, some kind of hormone make us more is that more risk kind of um insulin resistancy, and it will be impact on our hormone like a balancing. So today we gotta have a session about that with how we can manage the stress to prevent diabetic. Okay, I think Miss Ama will gonna share screen, or you would like to share the screen for the PowerPoint. We can assist with that. Wait, I will ensure with Ama. Hello, am I here, Kak Ama?
Okay, I will share my screen. Hold on.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Also for in the last session, we're gonna have fun quiz, which is you will get a reward. So for three top score, you will get a reward. We will share later. You will get one of the winner. We will share the free ebook about medical virtual assistant. So yeah. So for the time is yours for Wildan.
Thank you, Aisha, and thank you, Amma, for sharing the screen. Hello, everyone. How's it going? I hope everyone is doing well nowadays, and I hope everything has been okay for you guys, especially with working remotely. Nothing is easy. I also work remotely, by the way. I work remotely as a counselor and psychotherapist for Australian counselors, but Australian clients, but also I work with veterans in Australian settings. I also work with asylum seekers and immigrants that are currently in Australia and in Singapore. So I deal mainly a lot with the cases of trauma and the cases of acute stress disorder. And so, Aisha and the team has invited me today to talk a little bit about the stress sugar connection, to commemorate and also to raise awareness a little bit about the glucose management, and especially for those who are resistant with insulin and those who are perhaps prone towards acute stress. And so today I'm going to bring about a topic that some of you guys, perhaps have been known, especially if you're working in a medical settings. A lot of you, I can assume that you guys already know some of this, but there are also some things that is still quite under studies, because in fact, psychologists and psychiatrists just only recently been talking about the mind and body connection. I mean, the topic has been around for such a long time, but only then that we know what causes what. And today we're going to talk about the hormones. Today I'm going to try to make the language as simple as possible, so that some of you who are not working under clinical settings or hospital settings may also understand some of the challenges out there with stress. And if you do have any family that is, diabetic or perhaps, insulin resistant, today I'm offering you an open mind and a hope that you guys can practice some of these tricks, quote unquote, that I'm going to share today. First of all, thank you, Aisha, and also thank you, the team, for inviting me today. I'm so honored to be here, not only because this is a fun thing for me to do. I like to share about mind-body connection. That's what I do basically when I was in Australia. And that's what I'm still doing now in Indonesia when I'm dealing with clients with a certain predispositions of disorder. I realized that when I came into the room, most of you guys are Indonesians. Some of you are not, perhaps. I don't know. I'm assuming. So if I do speak too fast or if my accent throw you off, please do let me know on the chat. Okay. And at any moment, at any point during my presentation, if you do have any lingering questions, you can, take a note of the questions. And at the end of the session, if you want to discuss about some of the stress and how you can manage your blood sugar, I'm more than happy to help you with that. All right, enough jibber jabber. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so this is me. I know it doesn't look professional at all, but I'm a clinical counselor. And basically what I do is I provide counseling with people. I provide psychotherapy. If you guys don't know what psychotherapy is, if you're Indonesian, it's very similar to clinical psychologist in Indonesia, psikolog klinis. And so basically what I do is mostly the therapy part of it. In Indonesia, when you are a clinical psychologist, most of your work is done through testings and through diagnosis. I do diagnosis, but not as much as Indonesian would usually do it. I specialize in trauma and acute stress related cases. So those who have been to war, those have been into war, and those have been affected by war, and also marginalized community. Those are the people that I work with. And I'm currently working in Indonesia as a clinical psychologist. I'm also working in Australia and Singapore and Malaysia. Those are the bases of my clients. So when talking about remote circle, I feel like I resonate with this community because I also work with people that are in remote areas, and I do understand the challenges that you guys are facing through each day. Facing your computer, and then had to deal with the different time zones. And so this topic resonates a lot because obviously when you work, almost 6 hours in front of your laptop at home, especially some of you are perhaps mothers or dads who are also taking care of your child at home, stress is something that's unavoidable, something that is, built in basically. And so sometimes we don't really take a look into how our stress can affect us. And a lot of the time when it comes to stress, a lot of us just glaze over it just because there's these notions if we're working, especially in this day and age, working and stress, they're paired with each other, and stress is just normal. But in my line of work, even though stress is normal, just like any other thing, when things get too much and when things get too overwhelming, anything can go really bad, including stress. And so some of my clients that I've dealt with, not just from war or perhaps as immigrants, but also people that are in Australia living in a very safe country, but they have been exposed to so many acute stress. They have developed some other comorbidity or some other diseases within their body just because they've been living in stress for such a long time. One of those things that I noticed in Indonesian workers, I don't know if this resonates with you, a lot of Indonesians have acute GERD or gastrointestinal reflux disease. And, most of the causes are from stress. And so you see how it connects. So body and mind are just equally as important. So today we're going to basically dive deep into the mechanism behind stress, and I'm going to break some of the myths about stress, and I'm going to talk about how we can manage our stress in relation to diabetes as well, how we can help people who have insulin resistance because of stress. Let's go to the next section. All right, so stress and glucose. All right, so this is where we get a bit clinical and a bit medical. I'm going to go very slow. I'm just gonna stay here for a bit. So drop in the comments, some of you who perhaps know how stress can affect your glucose in several levels. Just drop a comment and perhaps, let me know what your thoughts are. Is there any relation to this? Or is it like totally separate? Because when it comes to things like this, what I see in like people, masses, especially those who are not working in medical settings like us, we feel as though stress and glucose, or stress with zinc or any other materials in our body, we think that there is no connections because there's these notions especially in Asian cultures or ethnic cultures, that when it comes to stress, it's just the mind, or basically the brain, right? But recent studies have basically provided us with the notions that our stress in a prolonged settings can actually produce a lot of changes both in the body but also in the brain, right? Particularly things to do with hormones. So we're going to talk about hormones later, right? We're also going to talk about how those hormones changes how we think, behave, and how we sort of deal with the onset upcoming stress. So when we're talking about stress, it is not as simple as we feel, right? A lot of people think that stress, just sleep it off, tidur aja, biar stresnya hilang. If you have big stress, just say like, forget about it, forget about your stress. And, that annoys most of my clients. And I'm sure some of you, if I tell you when you're stressed to just forget about your stress, you're going to tell me like, what the hell are you saying, Gordon? Like you can't just get rid of stress. The reason is because why is stress so hard to get rid of? It's because you can't just get rid of it by forgetting the stress, because it's not just in your mind. When someone goes through stress, essentially what is happening in the brain is, and this is going to resonate with some of you perhaps, your brain is activating what we call the survival instinct system. Now, survival instinct system is something that is to do with the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. Okay, so this system happens because your body is trying to protect itself from a perceived danger. So basically, let's say you are working online, and I'm sure some of you are doing case notes, some of you are doing medical records, and some of you are doing maybe client meetings, and those has deadlines. Those have some sort of KPI to achieve, right? So when you are stressed, essentially, the process in your brain is like this. So you perceive there is a deadline, and then the deadline is very short, and so your body feels anxious. There's the danger, the feeling of imminent danger. What if I don't finish this work on time? Am I going to get fired? So that's a trigger, essentially. And so your brain is going to go into this survival mode to protect itself from your body. Your body is actually eating your body as we speak whenever we get stressed. Your cells is actually battling your own cells when you are so stressed, right? So essentially what happens is when you enter the state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, what's going to happen is your body is flooded with these hormones we know very well, we call adrenaline. So adrenaline, or some people would call it norepinephrine, basically is a hormone that prepares you to fight or flight or freeze or fawn, right? So these four responses, let me just break it down to you first before we move on. So essentially when you are trying to survive, there's these four essential responses, right? The first two, I think most of you know. When there is a stress, right? Some of you will fight. Fight means when there is stress, some of you will go straight to the deadline and actually do it really quickly, just to ease your anxiety, right? I'm very sure some of us do that. The second one is the flight. flight is for those of you who are procrastinating. So if you are, if you have a task, a deadline, so instead of actually doing it calmly, you are running from your responsibility by not doing your work, by actually running from your task, right? So it seems like people think that running is literally running or literally fighting, but in psychological realm, it's all symbolism, right? So the fight is you doing it with a lot of anxious energy, perfectionism, right? So that's the fight thing. And then the flight one is you doing procrastinating, running from your responsibility, and perhaps for some of you who are working online, ghosting your clients. That's also flight response, right? It's because your body is so stressed, you can't really handle the stress, you can't really cope with it, and so you run from it, right? For some of you, your body is so stressed, you don't know how to deal with it. So instead of, thinking clearly, you actually fight by actually doing whatever you can to finish it, right? Thanks for the question, Ayu. And we're going to talk about these other two responses, right? The other response is what we call freeze, right? So freeze means literally freezing, right? This is a new one, and people sort of find it in 1990s. So some of you also know about the freeze response. Essentially, when someone is in the freeze response, is their brain shuts down. And when their brain shuts down, what happens? Essentially, you can't really think straight. So it's not literally freezing. For some of you, perhaps, yeah, if you have a really big anxiety before public speaking or meeting client, and suddenly you stutter, you can't speak, that's the freeze response in your body because the stress is so much that your body cannot decide to fight or to fly, right? So this is the freeze response. And so the freeze response can manifest in so many different ways. One of those ways is, as you said, dissociation, or what we call ngelamun in Indonesia, right? Ngelamun just means like spacing out for those of you who are not Indonesian. So spacing out just means that, you cannot really handle the stress in your body. You cannot run physically. You cannot fight physically for the stress. And so instead of you doing things physically, your brain just dissociates. Your brain just do not want to be in the body. And so that's why you space out ngelamun, right? So you space out. It's not because you are dumb, stupid, or you do not have the knowledge to do things. It's just that your body cannot handle the stress so much that you become out of your body. So some people would call this out of body experience, dissociation, right? Disassociate. So you disassociate from your body. You come out from your body. You're actually, some people would call it daydreaming, right? This is because stress, right? We don't know how to handle by running or by fighting, so we disassociate. Okay, and that perhaps answers your question. Thank you for that question and that prompt. And the last response is the fawning. So fawning is F-A-W-N. So fawning is something that we don't talk about enough in the medical settings, but it is talked a lot in psychological settings because fawning is a real response. Fawning is when someone is essentially trying to protect themselves by faking. So by faking, right? So faking means faking, you're not being true to yourself. So this might look like whenever you see your bosses and your boss is making you so stressed out, instead of actually saying what you want to say, or saying that you cannot do this work A, B, C, D, instead of you being able to do things assertively, because you're so scared, because you're so overwhelmed with this feeling of fear and invalidations, what's going to happen is instead you are trying to appease. I don't know if you guys know what appeasing is, but this is what Indonesians do most of the time. So appeasing is trying to make the other party feel better. So for example, you see your colleagues crying because of, let's say, a certain problem with the boss. Instead of you saying that, maybe you should take this responsibility, you want to try to appease that and say like, oh, it's okay, I will take care of that for you. It's different with empathy. With empathy, you're doing it mindfully. You're thinking about their well-being. Sometimes when we do it automatically, it's because it's our fear response that the other people may not harmonize with us. And so this is a very complex emotional system. And apparently, fawning only happens in the stress response for human being, just because how social we are. And also chimpanzee, by the way. So that's the four stress responses. Damn, I talked a lot about this. But anyways, these four responses will do things to your body, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. There you go. See, I just talked about this a little bit before, but essentially, when you're stressed, there's this fight or flight or freeze and fawn. And essentially what it activates in your brain is there's this thing we call HPA axis. I don't know if you're looking into the Zoom right now, but I'm going to point out something to you. So here on your brain, there's this part, right, which is your frontal lobe. This frontal lobe for the adults, it's for you to think clearly, to make reasonings, to logicize something. So you make logic out of something, which is in the front part of your brain, right? That logic is divided into two. The other one is mathematical logic, and the other one is the creative logic, right? But essentially, these two big parts of your brain is governing how you think, how you behave, and when you think using this front part of the brain, you're actually being mindful. This is what people call mindfulness, right? So when we're talking about mindfulness, it's the front part of the brain that you're actually utilizing most of the time. So when you're very aware that, for example, I'm picking up this object and I'm touching it and I'm feeling the texture, that's what frontal lobe activates. Essentially, when you're using this front part of your brain, you're able to think so clearly that it feels very easy to move through the world. But the thing is, when you're so stressed that your body is overwhelmed, as I mentioned before, with the fight or flight or fawn and freeze, there is this HPA axis activation. So HPA axis, I'm going to point this out. So here, so essentially on the back of your head, on the back, connecting towards your spine, there is what we call the brain stem. Some of you who does biology, I think you will like this thing. But essentially in your brain, there's this big part and there's a smaller part and it's attached to your spine. So this is my spine, right? So when you are so stressed, what's happening is basically instead of your front brain thinking, right? This thing is responding. So thinking and responding are two different things, right? Reacting. So these two are reacting. Basically, your brainstem and your HPA. So HPA stands for hypopituitary axis, which is the place where it governs the hormone of cortisol, it governs the hormones of adrenal, right? So any hormones of stress and love is being controlled in HPA axis. Some people would call it the reptilian brain, right? So when you're so stressed, instead of using this front part of your brain, instead of thinking, this part of your brain activates and it releases this adrenal and it releases this cortisol when you are in danger, when you are perceiving that there's a danger. It doesn't have to be an actual danger to your body, but the perceived danger is much more activating, right? So adrenaline and cortisol, let's talk about what those two does, right? First, let's talk about adrenaline. So adrenaline is basically a natural hormone in your body. You can also be injected with adrenaline on certain cases if you're overdosed. But essentially, when the adrenaline rushes in your body, it pumps a lot of the blood into your muscle, into your brain, into your organs, right? So it prepares you to fight. So when someone has an adrenal rush, when they fight or flight, they can be faster and they can be stronger for the momentary brief of time. So it's not like forever, right? And so cortisol, on the other hand, is the byproduct, right? So when we're talking about corticoid or cortisols, you can feel it later once you finish the fight or flight by feeling that sort of aching pain in your body. So some of you who does sports, perhaps, especially those sports that are quite contact-based, like boxing, once you finish your fight, then you feel the pain later. That's the cortisol doing its work. And the adrenal is actually flushing off from your muscle, right? So the cortisol release and adrenal happen at the same time, but you feel it on different times. Now, what's that got to do with mental health or biological health, especially diabetes, right? Well, when you are prepared to fight, what's going to happen is your body, your brain is going to need energy. And this is just normal, right? The same way if you are racing a car, then you might need a gasoline, right? You need benzene, Pertamax, right? For example. And so essentially, the sugar is your fuel. That's your gasoline, right? And when you are pumping a lot of adrenaline into your body, and if you're at high stress all the time, what's going to happen is they are going to send a signal in your hormone to just release the stored sugar, right? For immediate use, right? Immediate use, okay? So immediate use, I have to highlight because when you're stressed, it feels like you have to immediately need a fuel to fight or flight, right? So when there's a spike in this sugar release from the liver, especially, this can lead to hyperglycemia, right? Or some people would call it high blood sugar. Okay, so with chronic stress, especially when the fight or flight happens over and over, I'm not talking about 5 minutes or 10 minutes, right? So some of you might be stressed 5 minutes to 10 minutes or maybe 30 minutes before the meeting. But if you have been so stressed for about 1 week, 2 weeks, or even a month, or maybe some of you who have trauma, like childhood trauma or perhaps trauma to certain things, when you get triggered all the time, sometimes years, right? It becomes yearly kind of biological process. If your body keep pumping this adrenal and cortisol all the time, and there's a lot of spikes in your body, right? It becomes a chronic stress. And when you have high stress a lot of the time, then it becomes insulin resistance. So making the controlling of the blood sugar harder. Why is it harder? Because the pancreatic vessel cannot work properly, because it's blocked by the adrenal, right? And so it is important for not just diabetic patients, in fact, but for anyone who has any organ or what we call organic issues, or people would call it biological sickness, to also take care of how they think, how they feel, and how they interact with the world, right? This is where basically psychiatry sort of comes in and psychology sort of comes into the care of our patients, especially you as workers as well. There's a question for my, so if my head and neck feel tense and heavy when you have a lot of work deadlines, it's because of adrenal and cortisol. That's not a simple question for me to answer right now, because when someone feel tense and heavy, it could be really heavy stress. It could also be an effect of high blood pressure. It could also be, the adrenal and cortisol pumping continuously from the brainstem. That's why you feel it immediately on that part. So I'd suggest checking, if you can, right? Checking using, what's it called, the tension, but also check on a doctor if this happens in a longer periods, right? Okay, so essentially that's what happens, right? So when you are so stressed, basically your body is eating the sugar that is supposed to be stored in your liver. Why do we store sugar in liver? Because in liver, not only that they filter the bad stuff, but also they provide you with that long release of sugar so that you can maintain and have continuity in life, right? So when you sleep, for example, your heart is keep pumping, your other organ is still working, right? And the sugar, the fuel, is being stored on that particular tank, what we call liver, right? So with the diabetic dilemma, right, when we're talking about chronic stress, it's not just chronic stress in mental health setting as well. Those of you who are working remotely are prone to stress as well. And some of us tend to ignore and mask those stress just because we think that, some of us think that we get in touch with our clients. So what stress should we have, But the truth is everyone faces stress, and that's normal stress, and you cannot release the stress on certain periods of times and you just leave it be. That what can become or lead to ongoing problem later on in life, right? And stress doesn't just mean work stress. Some of you who are mothers, some of you who perhaps have some sort of comorbidity or sickness, or some of you who are very anxious about your health and the conditions around you in lives, those things can provide as a stress pathway, which leads into this sort of problem when it's not being dealt with properly in a longer period of time, right? So this is why I keep trying to raise awareness that stress is not as simple as we think. I think stress is just within our mind, but if we leave it be for years and years or months and months, it can lead into these things that we think it's not going to make any problem. All right. Okay, let's move on. Next one. All right, move on to the next one as well. Thank you. So let's talk about how the stress can sort of spiral down. And the reason that I put this title of spiraling downward is because if you don't manage your stress, right, it's going to get into a cycle. It gets into a cycle, but your body only has so much stored capacity. Biologically to deal with stress. And your capacity to deal with it is not going in a circle, in a vertical plane. It's going to go, that's why I'm talking here about chronic stress. The first time when you have stress, it might seem for you that the stress is normal. But as you lose your capacity to deal with it, some of you will spiral downwards, right? Unexplainable pain in your body. And then, sometimes the lose of motivation, right? These things, a lot of us really don't think about. Why? Well, part of it is culture of working, hustling, and not giving ourselves a break. But also, that's how the nature of stress is. When we are so tied into stress, it just feels like a second nature. And so hence, a lot of people live in chronic stress for years and years to come without knowing that they live in stress just because they've been living in this spiral. Okay, so let's talk about some of the impact here, right? So there is a physiological impact. So physiological impact just means the impact in your body, in your biological body. And so just like I explained before, with constant cortisol, you will have a lot of inflammations. Okay, let's talk about inflammation first. Inflammations is not as simple as you think as well. Just like stress, right? When you have stress for so long time, then you will have inflammations that's happening biologically, and it's naturally gonna happen if you keep pumping cortisol. Inflammation doesn't just mean, your body have rashes, right? It doesn't just mean that you have GERD, right? Those are two of the most common manifestation of the physiological impact of the stress. But when we're talking about inflammations, It could also be things such as, suddenly you have a weight of pain in your head, like migraine. Sometimes those can also be exacerbated by this inflammation. If you have wounds, for example, or some of you may have eczema, those can also be exacerbated by the cortisol because of the inflammations, right? So inflammations, in short, is basically your body telling you that it's enough, I need a break. It's your body telling you that some of your part of your body is eating themselves. So if you have rashes and then you have unexplainable pain coming, especially if you're a remote worker, some of you will make this normal. For example, like the back pain, some of you will say like, oh, it's okay, it's probably I'm old, I'm 30s, right? But if you have been exposed to constant stress and suddenly you have back pain, shoulder pain, without an unexplainable thing, you have a really good chair, you have a good posture, but you still feel this pain in your body. That could also be your body telling you that there is some sort of inflammation going on, right? So it's not as simple as a wound, When we're talking about GERD, for example, the gastrointestinal reflux disorder, those can also be caused by there is this inflammations within your gut. So inflammation can happen anywhere, really. It can happen to your organs, skin, for some of you who are sensitive to skin outbreaks, but also, things within your body, right? So if you have unexplainable pain, tired, and then you feel that there is no energy biologically, then, watch out your stress level, okay? Maybe you need to chill down a little bit. So when there is a sustained hyperglycemia, so when you are stressed constantly, your cortisol is basically, allowing this peak of sugar level in your body. If it happens in a long time, this thing called HbA1c, when it's been sustained for a long time, it can lead into complications other than diabetes. For example, liver disease, and then there is what we call it, the bile disease, and so many more, right? Pancreatic disease, insulin resistance, and many more. Because those organs here next to your diaphragm, those organs are working together like a connection of webs, right? So if one is affected in a long time, then the other may have been impacted as well. Those are just the physiological impact. I'm sure if you meet a psychiatrist, they will tell you more about this. This is outside of my scope of knowledge, but I did study a little bit about the physiological impact. But let's talk about the behavioral breakdown, right? People think that when it comes to stress, it just, leads into this physical problem. Some of them is poor sleeping. Obviously, if you're so stressed, you're so anxious, how can you sleep so soundly, right? So if you have poor sleep, you have more spike of cortisol when you wake up, just because your body is so tired, it's so heavy. Some of you may feel this, like at the night you get a deadline or some sort of stress, you try to sleep it off, and when you wake up, your body just feels like it's really heavy, like it feels very hard to wake up, So that's basically that cortisol. It's like the effect of cortisol happening in your body, and you can actually feel it. That's the symptoms of inflammation. So when you wake up, some of you girls who are more noticeable, I think, like for men, we don't really notice how we wake up, but for some girls, when they wake up, they feel like the cheeks are puffy or their eyes are puffy, right? Those are also perhaps the effect of what you eat at night, but also your stress. If you have a really big stress level, then when you wake up, so you will have this puffy face. That's what we call inflammation of the face. Second one is it triggers emotional eating. And this is what we don't talk about enough, I think. Why? I just don't know. But the thing is, many of my clients who suffer with high stress, some of them tend to go into two different sets. One of them is the fight, the other one is the flight. And so the fight people who have this stress response to fight, they tend to, how do I say this? To eat more, right? To eat more whenever they stress. People who have the tendency to fleet, from their problem. Instead of to eat more, they will eat less. So there are two kinds of people when they find stress. Some of them don't want to eat at all. They just want to, I don't know, they just want to lay down and not do anything. Some people are triggered by that and they eat a lot more. This is what we call the emotional eating, or some people in Australia who would call it stuffing their face, because literally, if you're so stressed, some people actually stuff their face. They will eat until they feel that the stress and cravings are gone. The things with emotional eating is because you have so much high stress level of cortisol and adrenal, you cannot really feel your gut feeling. So some of you will eat until some of you will puke, or some of you will feel as though your tummy is really filled, right? Because you cannot feel these satiations of eating, right? There's no mindfulness here, right? Remember, when you're using the reptilian brain, you don't think, you are not mindful. And essentially what's happening is it's your body taking care of you automatically. But sometimes when your body takes care of you automatically, it's not always a good thing, right? Sometimes, it leads to this problem, especially when it is coming out of anxiety. And last one is motivation for self-care. And this is very obvious. If someone is so stressed, so much so, and it's been a long time stress, then obviously they are trying, or they are prone towards moving away from healthy hygiene habits. Healthy hygiene habits are things such as proper sleep, proper eating, proper exercises, and proper socialization. When you are so stressed, sometimes you just want to disconnect from the world just to take out the stress. Some of you don't know how to disconnect, and so you keep connecting until you pass out. Those are the type of people that I normally see. Let's see, there is a question here. Is stress actually linked to personal hygiene, like feeling too exhausted to take care of yourself? Yes. Well, not a simple thing to answer, but mostly yes. If we take a look into people with chronic depression or chronic stress, generally speaking, because they have lower level of energy, lower level of libido, it's just very hard for you to move on and be excited to do things. One of them is personal hygienes. Let me just talk a little bit out of the diabetes, if that's okay. One of the things that I notice a lot in Australia is there is this habit of hoarding. I don't know if you heard of hoarding. So hoarding is essentially when someone is in grieving, and so they pile up a lot of rubbish at their house. They don't want to clean the house just because there is a lot of fond memories. And when you're so depressed, you just don't want to do anything, right? So stress can lead into things that are behavioral, such as not wanting to take care of personal hygiene, including shower, including things that are so simple, such as clipping your nails or cutting your hairs, basically simple personal hygienes. And so this is one of the things that I usually assess from a client before doing any sort of groundwork with them, because those leads into different problems, not just emotional, right? I hope that answers it, Nirvana. And again, how long the simplest ideal break take? Okay, I personally know when my body's giving signal to take a break, I've tried to take a break. Okay, all right, I'm gonna answer that on later. Hold that second in the thought, and I'm gonna answer it later, okay? And so, yeah, so when they say desserts for stress, this explains it, definitely. So generally when someone is stressed, the type of food that they're putting into themselves are not so healthy, because those foods just satiates the cravings, such as sugar, salt, and those things that are not fulfilling. When you take a look into people who are stress eating, generally what they eat are high in calorie because they need that energy again. Of energy, sugary stuff, and really you have that, excitement again. Right. So are you hold that thought for a second? I'll answer that on next couple of slides. Let's move on to the next slides. Thank you. All right. So this will perhaps answer some of the questions Are you? Let's move on into the next one, just to reveal what's going to happen. All right. So basically, when it comes to holistic care, so I am always an advocate of holistic care. It just simply means that when I work as a psychologist, I don't just work myself. I sometimes work with psychiatrists, I work with doctors, I work with pharmacists, I work with traditional healers. And the reason is when we are trying to create sustainable change, you cannot just fix one pillar and hope everything for the best. What if the 4 pillar or 3 pillars are broken? Then you cannot just, hope to change one and everything will be sturdy. So essentially you have to take care of everything, not just the body, not just the mind, not just the spiritual part of you. So there's the 3 pillars of sustainable change in your body. The first one starts with always a mindset. The reason why we start in mind, not the body, as some people will say like, oh, body is much more important, but the mind or the intention always governs the body. How you think, how you feel generally will lead on what things you will choose to do, right? If some of you think that, okay, I feel my body is not healthy, then I'm going to take exercises, right? That's a healthy coping mechanism. But some people, if they don't have such a healthy mindset, when they feel as though their body is breaking down, they just say like, okay, well, this is probably the way I die, right? So let's talk about first mindset, right? So when we're talking about mindset, it's not really, I think I miswritten this one. So it's not always challenging negative thoughts, right? When I say challenging negative thoughts here, it doesn't mean in a toxic positivity kind of way. Some of you will mistake this as like, oh, if I feel really sad, then my mind should say like, oh, you shouldn't be sad, right? What I'm trying to say here is you need to reframe what you see as what you see. Because a lot of us, we don't do that. We tend to frame the things that we see as what we feel. Okay, so for example, let's talk about insecurity in the body, right? Especially for girls, sometimes when it comes to body, how the body is shaped, sometimes we look at the mirror and we see our body and we say like, oh, I feel like I'm gaining 2 pounds, I'm getting a lot more plumpier, right, chubbier and stuff like that. And it becomes your feeling instead of your thinking, right? So you're using the feeling brain instead of this prefrontal cortex, right? And so when it comes to one of the health practices is instead of keep seeing things that is negative in your life as your own doing, see it as the reality or a data, for example. This is what people do in CBT. So if you know what CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy. When you go to psychologists, they will tell you to say like, oh, well, if you are fat, for example, is it true? And what's the standard? If the standard of Indonesia is true, what can you do about it? Instead of saying that, oh, I'm going to beat myself because I cannot lose 2 pounds, 3 pounds from my body, right? So this will allow you to have more compassion because you see things mindful instead of seeing things automatically from your feeling, right? The feeling is important, of course. The mind is how you think is also important, but to just favor one over the other, it's not wise. So some of us are a bit more feelers, some of us are a bit more thinkers. If we think too much, sometimes we don't take care of our body, we don't love ourselves too much. But if we use too much feeling, sometimes we're so negative about how we feel. So one needs to balance the two. The second one is the movement, right? So the movement is the body part. So basically, if you are trying to get into a healthy habit, there is a saying in the Chinese proverb by Lao Tzu. So Lao Tzu mentioned the journey of 1,000 steps the journey of 1,000 miles begins in a single step. So basically, in order for you to make your body healthy, you have to use activities, movements. Start from small. A lot of people want to start from big, Like they want to go straight to gym, become a really good UFC fighters, or become a really strong, like really big muscle. But like you need to find joy on what you do. If something that you enjoy through movement is simply walking, then do walking. Stop following the trends. I keep saying this to young people, especially in Indonesia, pelari culture. If you can't run, if you don't have the ability to run, and if you have like knee pains, or if you are obese, or if you have problems in your knees, then don't force yourself to run. For God's sake, just walk. Just walk if you enjoy walking. If you don't enjoy walking, if you like to go to nature, just looking around in the greenery, do that, as long as you move, right? Movement is such an important and integral part in our body. And when we are stressed, some of us don't really move at all because we just want to lay back. And we think that resting is sleeping, and sleeping takes more energy. But doing small movement and gentle movement is just as important for you to move these hormones through your body and burn the excess, right? So move, please. Whether it's walking, whether it's doing Tai Chi Chuan, whether it's, running, whatever you find joy in movements, do that, even if it means working. Some of you are, enjoying working and moving around. So if you can move, take that as an opportunity for you to make a sustainable change. Small movement, start with small one, right? So if you're not used to doing lari-lari like lari culture, then, walk. If you're not used to walking, then, senam, do a bit of aerobic exercises. And if you don't want to do aerobic exercises, sit down and, do some exercises in your table whenever you're working remotely. As simple as that. And last one is the margin. So you also need to draw a boundary, right? Draw a boundary doesn't mean that you're always saying no, but you know when you're tired, you know when you need to rest and recover, and you know how to communicate that. Simple as that, basically. That's the margin. So the first one is for your mind, second one is for your body, and the third one is for your social settings, right? So you need to understand how you sort of balance these three in your life. And sometimes one over the other, it can be harder, but this is what we're doing, striving towards a positive, sustainable change. And so to answer, I use question, how long do I need to take a break, right? The answer is not going to be as simple as 1 hour, 2 hour break, because it really depends on your stress level. It really depends on how long you have been stressed and how long you have been living this way. Every person is different. Some people, I can say 30 minutes of deep breathing exercises, and they can feel as though their life has changed. Some clients that I work with takes maybe 3-4 sessions, which is about 4 hours of exercises, until they know how to release their emotions and release their stress. But if you're asking about what's the ideal time, when we're taking a look into journals, what I found to be a good number is 45 minutes to an hour of regular break is more than enough for most people. Okay, but I need to highlight for most people. This may not work for you, this may not work for me. For me personally, it takes me about 2 hours for me to just dump everything out from my body, right? Okay, good question, Aisha. So how is the proper way to say no in work, especially when we're already so many things in our plates? Good question. I think, when it comes to social issues like this, it's quite difficult in Indonesian setting as Indonesians, right? As Indonesian, we tend to say like, okay, ma'am, I'll do it soon. And noticing that your body is also stressed. But no doesn't literally mean no, right? I think in Western culture, I can say no very easily when I meet my client. I can just say like, sorry, I can't do that. I have some other errands to do. And usually they will be so much more understanding. When it comes to Asian culture, when I work in, Singapore and also Australia, in Indonesia, some people would take my no as a rejection. But sometimes no is not a rejection, right? No can be a delay, for example. For example, I cannot do that for the moment, and I need a bit of space before I can do that, right? So essentially what I tell people to do when they're trying to set up boundaries is you need to understand the setting of the boundaries, because the setting of boundaries can be very different from one culture to another. In Asian culture, when we set up boundaries, usually there is an expectations. So expectations just means that when you say no to your boss, you have to explain why no and if there is any alternative. So that's just the truth in our culture, in Asian culture. We cannot just say no without any explanations, right? In my workplace when I was in Australia, when I say, sorry, I'm sick, I cannot go to campus, they will just say, okay. But when I do that in Indonesia, they need all sort of reasons, like ada nggak surat dokter, the doctor's slip, ada nggak resep, blah, 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 and so when I see that pattern, turns out it's not just an Indonesian problem. My friends from Thailand and my friends from Vietnam, my friends from Brunei, who I've worked with in Australia, they tell me it's exactly the same. So there is this different expectations in different culture when it comes to say no. I'm getting into the point, by the way. Sorry for moving around, but essentially, in Asian culture, if you want to communicate no in a polite way, you have to provide them with some sort of certainty of expectation. One of them is by saying that, oh, I'm sorry, right now I have this thing to do, but I will be with you in this date or in this hour. So saying no doesn't mean like no totally, but it could also be mean like, okay, I'll do it later because I have something to do now. Usually that works really good, especially with my Indonesian bosses. They will say like, okay, well then thank you for letting me know. I'll meet you in 3 p.m. or something like that, just because I have set up these expectations. But there are sometimes things that we cannot do for them just because we cannot do for them because it's out of our competence, it is out of our pay slip. We're paid one certain amount, but they give us more work than we should have. And so sometimes I would be a bit more stern by saying that, thank you for entrusting me with this work, but unfortunately, I have another commitment to do, and this commitment will take this amount of time, this X amount of commitment. And usually they will rethink on how they approach you. So that's just the way it is in Asian culture. It doesn't have to be like that, but it is the fact. And unfortunately, I can't change that for you. And I notice the frustrations, but it is just because that our culture works in a hierarchical structure, not a liberal structure, right? So if you're in Western culture, people tend to see you wherever positions you are, whether you're bossy or whatever, you're the same. So like there is no hierarchy. But if you're in Asian culture, you have to explain a bit more expectations and blah 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 because there is this hierarchical structure. Your boss is like higher than you. Your manager is higher than you, and higher than manager is the boss, and so on and so forth. And the reason that you have to provide explanation is because the upper people tend to think in delegation. And when delegation is not successful, they need some sort of things to hold on, which is the expectation that you set for them. Hence why you need to explain. I hope that answers the question in a cultural perspective and corporate. Okay, let's move on to the next one. I think I have so many slides. Let's see. All right, so let's move on to the next. Okay, so let's talk about polyvagal theory. The reason I'm bringing this theory is because so that you can sort of explain your own stress. So essentially, our body is living in a state of spectrum. So our body is not always calm. It's not calm and then not calm, right? So it's not flat and then like this, right? So your life is always been moving towards stages. Sometimes you feel that your body is in safe zone or safe space, so you can feel very calm. connected, regulated. These things are the things that you experience when you are with family who supports you or workers who supports you, right? So whenever you're calm, whenever you feel productive, you feel like you're in flow, you're in tune, what happens is you're using the frontal brain and you allow your reptilian brain to take care of your body to heal. So this is why when someone who has GERD, when they're so relaxed, they don't have this problem anymore, right? They don't have this reflux problem. It's because they're in the ventral vagal. So ventral vagal just means that you're in a state of calm. You're in a state of okay. It doesn't have to be calm all the time. Sometimes happy, sometimes you feel very balanced. The next one is there's a sympathetic, right? The reason why it's called sympathetic is, I don't know if you know these terms, but there is parasympathetic and sympathetic system in your body. And so parasympathetic just means, it's happening, but when you put your attention to it, you can do it with awareness, right? So when you're doing things in sympathetic way, it's basically you're not aware of it. So when you're stressed, fight or flight, when you're in these responses, you actually are not aware of that. So sometimes we all have denials of, I'm not stressed, I'm okay, like, okay, yeah, you seem not stressed, but you are, right? So when you're in the sympathetic system, basically there's a lot of glucose spike because there's too much stress in your body. But when there is too much stress going on, as I mentioned before, some of us cannot deal with the stress by fighting or fleeing, and so we shut down, or what we call dorsal vagal, freeze and fawn. So freeze is freezing and fawn is trying to appear, right? So when you freeze and fawn, it's dissociation and metabolic burnout, right? So dissociation, if you don't know what this is, in a simple term, it just means, you're not in your head. So you cannot think, but so you just space out, like as if you just want to be out of the world, right? So this is the three internal states that's naturally happening in your life. Sometimes you move from one, sometimes you stay longer on the other, right? Let's move on. All right, so this is some of the toolkits that I usually use for my clients, right? You can use this yourself. There's so many journals, evidence-based, telling you to do this if you do have chronic stress problems in your lives. The first one is mindfulness. You know what mindfulness is? So basically, I don't know if you guys know what mindfulness is, but some people mistook mindfulness as meditation, unfortunately. But I would like to provide you with a bit of disclaimer that mindfulness isn't meditation. There is a mindfulness meditation, but it's a very different thing, right? So mindfulness is essentially that you're doing things aware, right? You put your mind into a full attention. So for example, if I am drinking this glass of jahe or ginger, right? So being mindful just means that I am feeling the texture of the water, actually feeling the taste, and also trying to smell, the entirety of the experience, right? I'm also feeling how the water flows into my throat, into my stomach, all right? So you can do this with any other activities. It's not just eating or drinking. You can do this with writing, painting, touching an object. Hence why some people have stress ball. I don't know if you guys know what stress ball is. It's like a small thing in your hand that you can squeeze whenever you feel stress. That's what mindfulness is, putting your mind into an activity and actually being present. I don't know if you guys know what being present really means in Indonesian sort of context, but being present just means that when you do things with care, right? Do things with care. If you are Muslim, this thing we call khusyuk. That's what mindfulness essentially is. You're doing things with full thinking. Your mind is there. You're giving your all into this one activity and not thinking about the other things while you're doing it. The other one is the important one, I think, is sleep hygiene. Aim for 7 to 9 hours. Some of you 7 is enough, and try to be consistent. So some people just think that 7 hours of sleep is good, but consistent sleep is way better, especially in a cool, dark, screen-free room. So in my room I have a lot of shades here that I put, and the reason is sometimes I sleep very late at night, right? And so I stow away my laptop and my tablet, and when the room is dark, essentially my brain is deactivating. So the reason why some of you feel tired when you wake up after using scrolling phone for hours is because your brain is not shutting down slowly. And so when you wake up, you feel groggy, you feel stressed, right? And then last one that people use is connection and gratitude. This is not the kind of gratitude that people keep pushing on you. Some people say like, just be grateful of what you have. It's not like that. Gratitude is something that's internal. So when you bring yourself to see the things that you feel grateful of, instead of saying that, oh, you have to be grateful of this. No, like for example, today I'm so grateful just to be able to walk without any pain. Simple thing, right? Just by remembering that, it calms the body down naturally, right? So this is where, for you who are Muslim or Christian, the dua, or some of you, the prayers, right? Reverence for the Christians one, this kind of thing release oxytocin, right? So prayers have been, like genuine prayers, not the prayers that people force upon you, have been studied, and it does reduce a lot of stress. So prayer is not just asking, by the way. Prayers could also mean telling this divine or God, whatever you believe, that you need some sort of support, essentially, right? So it's like talking or counseling, except it's to your God. Funny thing to say, but that's what it is. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay. All right. So we can do this together if you want. And I will sort of guide this process. So essentially, this is one thing that I do to some of my remote clients, especially when they are so stuck in their stress. The reason I'm using this is because when we focus on the breath, everyone has breath. People can all breathe, right? But second, that is just because it's so natural for us to do this, right? You can do this. You don't have to turn on your mic because it's going to sound really weird. And I don't want to listen to the, But essentially, the 4-7-8 breathing technique is just, the 4th second you inhale and 7th second you hold, right? And with the 8, you want to release, right? But I just want to make this simpler for you because I understand some of you may have breathing problem. So some of you who have asthma, some of you who has GERD, I know that some of you cannot breathe really deep into your tummy, right? So you don't have to force yourself to breathe. So instead of 4-7-8, I'm gonna make it 3-3-3. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna lead this. Right. First, I want you to just sit comfortably. Preferably, I would say put your legs on the floor, both of them, if you're sitting on the chair. But if you're sitting not on a chair, make sure that you're in a pose where you are stable. Stable just means that you cannot fall backward, forward, right? You feel pretty grounded. If you're on the bed, that's also fine. Lay down, and first, I want you to just be. Just sit down or whatever pose you are in. Just feel how your body is connected with the ground. For me, it's my butt. For some of you, it's your back. For some of you, it's your legs. right? Okay. Once you feel quite stable, I want you to be in this place for a bit. Just wait. And allow your attention to just melt into the ground or the bed. Okay. So first, let's start with just breathing in gently and taking it out. So 3-second breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 3-second hold, and 3-second out. Okay, let's do that a couple of times again. Breathe in, 3-second, 1, 2, 3, hold, 2, 3, and out, 2, and 3. One more, 1, 2, 3, in, 3, 2, 1, hold, and out, 2. Okay, right, so that's the normal one. Let's do one more, but this last one, I want you to just, let's not do whoosh like in my PowerPoint, but just do like the sigh. So sighing just means like, right? So let's do that. 1, 2, 3, in. And feel the tension melting away from your shoulder to your hands. Let's do that again. Okay, and feel that your chest is relaxing. One more. And feel that your back is relaxing towards the ground. And I want you to stay in this position for a while. Okay, so whenever you're ready, just shake your body. Just move lightly. If you're in the bed, just move lightly side to side. Or your neck and your head, right? Okay. For some of you, this may work. For some of you, you still feel stressed, and that's okay. Because some of you may need to repeat this in 5 to 6 more cycles, right? But for those of you who feels that your body is relaxing, I want you to remember that feeling of the calmness, of the groundedness, right? And I want you to install that in your body. So next time, whenever you feel so tense, just and just release all your tension. Right. So I hope that's one of the way that you can bring home as one of your tools. This is like mindful meditation, but this is what I call grounding breathing, right? So if you still feel stressed, that means sometimes when you breathe, you push it too deeply. So don't push it too deeply. And preferably if you can do it sitting down or laying down, that's the best way to do it. Right, let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. Right, now it's the question time. So let's answer some of the questions or some sort of lingering thoughts that some of you may have. Alrighty, drop down your question in the comments. I'll be more than happy to help you out. Anything related to mental health, stress, and management of physiological stress. Okay. Seems like there is no question coming in. Is anyone typing? Okay. No questions so far? I think most of the question I've answered during my
Yeah,
explanation.
during I think some
Mhm.
of them like what's that you call?
Yeah.
They ask like spontaneous. So
Questions, yeah. Good.
yeah.
Alrighty. Okay. Well, I mean, if there's no questions, that's fine as well. What's the next slide? I think we have one more slide, right? Oh, okay. Thank you so much. That's it. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for today's session. Oh, there you go. There is a question, Aisha. So, one
Yes.
question from Sari. How does remote work contribute to increased stress levels, and what early signs should we watch for? Oh, thank you so much for this, Sari. So I work with Genash Team now, and so Genash Team is a remote company where they sort of hire people from marginalized background, right? Marginalized background just means they're either indigenous or people who have gone through asylum seeking, and so they work all online through their countries, also in Australia as well. And so, how does remote work contribute to increased stress levels? The thing is, with remote work, I know it's flexible. I know it's just nice. You don't have to go to office. But the thing is, with remote workers, a lot of them are prone towards the feelings of isolations, but also a higher stress. What's it called? Like penumpukan. So basically, there is one stress over another piling up as remote worker, right? Um, what contributed to that is just because of the nature of the work. So when you work remotely, when you are trying to either delegate tasks or try to say no and try to negotiate your work portions, what I found with a lot of employees are it's kind of difficult for them to delegate work. And sometimes there's a lot of misunderstandings when it's online, especially when you're working with people from different cultures, different expectations, right? And it's very different than you, for example, moving to Australia or you moving to Singapore and actually working there. Because when it comes to assimilations of culture, you need to interact with people. When you don't see how they are and you don't know what their culture is, there's a lot of this, especially us, we make assumptions that our work is not good enough, right? So hence that's what contributes to that, right? So what early signs should we watch for? I think the early signs that we should watch for, and this is most signs that I keep trying to raise awareness of, is first, if you feel that whenever you go online like this, you feel a high sense of anxiety without any sort of prompts, then you need to watch out for that. Because anxiety, when you left for too long, you're going to have a lot more spikes of stress moments. Second, if you feel that you have been feeling a lot of inflammations in your body, whether it's rashes, right? Whether it's lower back pain or you get sick easier, those things are what you need to really watch for, especially the pain that you feel. The pain that you feel, whether it's emotionally or physically, it's basically your body telling you that you need to watch out for the signs, right? So that's the simple ways to answer it. Sorry, I hope that answers your question. And Norfaina, how do we distinguish between stress-related symptoms and those caused by blood sugar imbalance? This is very nuanced way to answer this, right? Because essentially, there are things that overlaps. So overlaps just means that some symptoms will only be felt on blood sugar imbalance. Some symptoms can only be felt by high stress, and some symptoms can be felt by both of them, right? The things that overlaps is first, you feel tired, you feel there's high sense of fatigue and emotional imbalance sometimes, both by blood sugar and also stress can also be experienced. And also, different pains in the body, in different regions. So that's the overlapping if you see the Venn diagram. What's unique though, if it's blood sugar imbalance, there is normally the symptoms of hypo or hyperglycemic symptoms, such as the loss of energy. and then the loss of what's it called, like cold sweat, for example, right? Those things that are experienced by diabetic people are quite obvious. And those of a stress, usually they feel a lot more tightness, especially in the regions of the shoulders. The reason why the region of the shoulders and the back are the most prominent pain for people with stress is as a baby, as a mammals, we naturally want to do like this. Like if you see the image of baby, we want to curl up for safety. But because we're adults and it's not socially acceptable for us to do that whenever we feel stress, we try to correct. And so the abductor muscle and psoas muscle in the back is very tight. So that's the sign that you feel a prolonged level of stress. Generally, on the back pain here, especially on the muscle, it's not because of blood sugar. Very rarely that it is, but you may need to check. So what I would encourage is if you're unsure, instead of checking Google or something like that, go to doctors or just consult with a professional, because that will help you know whether it's because of your blood sugar or because of a chronic stress level. I hope that answers Nirvana. Well, yeah, I think that's it. Aisha, is there anything to add?
Yes, thank you so much, Wildan,
No worries.
for the insight. I think it's so insightful for us because, yeah, as we know, we are as a remote worker, sometimes we're not aware about what kind of thing that naturally make us a stress. Yeah, so that's why that's a very insightful. And for everyone, we will have like a fun quiz. So the quiz is more like game, which is like when you try to answer the quiz based on the topic, the today's topic, uh, and the top scorer will have a reward. Will get a reward. Wait, I will share the link for the quiz. I think Google quiz is good. Wait, I will share here. So stay tuned. Oh, oops, wait. What happened with it? So just join through. I see. Let me know if you are able to join the link. I will share here on my screen. Wait. Are you able to join, everyone? The link is this. Okay, it's already. I think we're gonna start. Can we start at 9 p.m.? Let's see how many people will join us. Oh, I think that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's go to join. Yeah, we'll start 9 p.m. Wait. Wow, congratulations for salsa. Here's our final standing for the third is Nick. The second one, Earning, and the first one is Salsa. Okay, let's come for Wood One on the final standings. Please contact our admin for the reward. Okay, oh my God, this already on the end of session. Thank you so much for Wildan as our guest speaker. So today was so insightful session, right? Because maybe it's not about medical virtual assistant, but this insightful for remote worker or especially for medical virtual assistant because we're working remotely. We also some of us working in the nighttime of Indonesia because we're working for Western client. So that's why that's a very important to keep our stress was that keep under our awareness. Be aware about what kind of thing that make us stressful and then how we handle or dealing with our stress. So that's very important because yeah, it will be impact on our body condition. I mean, like especially in the blood sugar as well, right? So as we know, diabetic is I think it's the first place like chronic disease in Indonesia. There's a lot of people of Indonesian that they got a diabetic, and especially for a woman because we have like a hormone that made us sometimes what's that is insulin resistance. So that's a very important to aware that. Okay, thank you so much, Wildan, for your time to join us today. We're so glad to have you. And also for all the participants today, thank you so much for joining our session. Hopefully it can helpful and insightful for everyone. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye bye. Take care.